the story of a normal man. James is a normal man. James got startled by the ringing school bell. He was not even finished with his presentation about bonds, and yet his students were gone already. He laughed to himself, not at all worried about the weather getting progressively worse. He could hear the rumbling, see the dark clouds in the sky. He closed all the windows, as well as the projector. He took great care in erasing any traces of writings on the blackboard. The classroom was now barely illuminated by what little light there was outside. He wore his winter coat, his gloves and scarf, and swiftly exited the classroom, locking the classroom door behind him. The winter chill was unrelenting. The wind wheezed through the trees. The first snowflakes were starting to fall. Cold as they were, James was forced to run to his car. He drove for quite a while. How unlucky he was to have to work so far from home. An hour's worth of driving later, James finally saw his house on the horizon. That old and yet well-kept building. Was it built during the war, or perhaps earlier? He could never tell. Once he finally unlocked that wooden door, the sole barrier between himself and his beloved armchair, it was snowing hard. Oh, that smell. It was Martha's perfect chicken soup. Perfect. That is what James called it. He would always ask her to make it when it was cold outside. He kissed his wife, with her just barely having time to make the table before James rushed in, ready to eat. After a lovely lunch, James decided to take a hot bath and get started on correcting his students' assignments. He moved upstairs, undressing and getting into the tub. He was so tired. When he was done, he wore a white collared shirt, blue slacks, and his favorite vest, now ready to get to work. He went into his office, opening his briefcase and staring outside at the snowfall. It had gotten dark quickly, the clouds now having a dark blue hue. He turned the old lamp on his desk on and got a red marker to aid him in his task. A few A's, an A+, and quite a lot of B's and C's later, he was finished. He glanced at the old clock that stood above his bookcase. We're 1:20. How quickly had the time passed, he thought to himself. He went to check on his wife, silently sleeping. How lovely, how peaceful she was. Even as she laid on their bed, he admired her beauty. That lovely smile she had on her face, even asleep, reminded him of their constant joy together, the never-ending happiness. He went downstairs, grabbing a mug. He was going to make a big dose of coffee and read a nice book. Moby Dick. That was his chosen book. He must have dozed off on his armchair. It was 07:32 now. On the kitchen table, there was a note reading, "I went to help my mom with cleaning out the snow. See you when I get home, kisses, Martha." He sighed, sad to be unable to see his wife. He stared outside at the driveway, blocked by snow. Still, he did not think much of it. He lit up the fireplace and turned the telly on. He had a weekend of relaxation, finally. Christmas was just around the corner anyway. He decided to treat himself to a nice breakfast, his belly urging him to. After a quick toasting and buttering of some bread, he ate and washed the dishes. He even decided to shovel the driveway, as well as the doorway. The thick, dense snow covered the ground, as well as the branches of the trees. There was a large forest behind his and Martha's house. His nephew always called it scary. James did not pay much attention to it. He found it to be quite atmospheric in nature. He got done shoveling an hour, perhaps two later. He opened the garage to find his car still there. Strange, thought James. Did Martha go to her mother's flat on foot? That would be a bizarre decision, especially considering her hatred for all things cold and the snow that had covered everything outside. Regardless, James ignored it. It was midday now, maybe 13:53, when James decided to warm up yesterday's soup. He was not quite sure of what recipe Martha used, but it certainly was delicious. James felt tired again. He took a nap until 18 o'clock. He woke up feeling a tad bit cold. He decided to go downstairs and use that old phone to call his wife. Where was she even? Before even getting a chance to think, the phone rang, loudly enough to be heard throughout the entire house. James rushed to get it, just barely missing it. He felt angry. He could not find the number. His sight became dark for a second, maybe two, maybe more. Nevertheless, he opted for another hot bath to warm up. A gray cardigan, white collared shirt, black slacks and shoes. That is what he wore this time around. He always dressed like a man double his age, despite still being in his mid-30s. James saw the sky darken once more, now covered by clouds, no longer bluish in tone but pitch black. He saw thunder in the distance. A myriad of thoughts crossed his mind. Knock, knock. That is the sound his office walls echoed. He let go of caution. Running downstairs, he went to the front door. Once open, it would reveal nothing more but snow, leaves, and cold winter air. Disappointed, angry, enraged, James walked upstairs, the staircase creaking, submitting to his every movement. What an old house it was. James went back into his bedroom. It was there that he came face to face with his old hunting rifle, passed on to him by his father. He loved hunting. He was good at it, never missed his mark. Fondly he grabbed it, loading it as he did it. Rifle in hand, he went downstairs. His walls echoed that same damn knock. The same phone rang throughout his skull, and his mind was filled with a sense of rage. He would smash that phone. Once more he walked to his front door. He opened. He raised. He aimed. He fired. Bang. And the ringing stopped, the knocking as well. Now the only thought James had was to find a place in the woods. A pretty place. A place for that bloody, rotting corpse of whom he once loved and called his wife. Now, though, it was nothing more than a stain on the floor, the ground. Small rivers of blood were going through the white snow. All the memories, the burning passion that transformed into a quiet peacefulness with each other, was nothing more but a bullet wound to the throat and a tear in the snow. Oh, Martha, how much I loved you. Rave to the grave. Who doesn't like a good party? Ever been to a rave before? Once you go, you fall in love or find out it isn't for you. When you fall for raves, you fall hard. The glowing sticks waving around, beautiful expressive clothing, or hardly any. The glow and the dark lights, the drops. When the DJ has a sick beat you can lose yourself in. One carefree night at a time, you can heal your inner child. I'm a seasoned vet who has gone to so many, but my favorite is the Halloween raves. They are so much fun with all the costumes. The venues are decorated in kind, all spooky and playfully scary. My friend and I were going to an intense techno event called Rave of the Damned, complete with vendors, body paint, multiple stages. It was going to be lit. We arrived at the warehouse at 10 p.m., all excited and dressed up. I was a rave fairy complete with iridescent wings. To our surprise, the line was so long. It felt like at least an hour had passed, every minute creeping slowly by. Oddly enough, our fully charged phones were losing bad like mad. Finally, we were let in, and immediately it looked like an awesome event. Something was off we couldn't quite shake. There was a strange egg smell in the air. The costumes were so elaborate you had to question if they were real. While I stood in line at the bar waiting to order a drink, my friend Rose rushed up to me, clearly panicking. "Forget the drinks. We have to go," she stated urgently. "Go? We just got here," I said, feeling confused. She began to shake, as she was cold, and began to pull at my arm. "Ouch! Where are we going?" "Just in the corner you have to see, and you'll believe me," she nearly screamed. What the shit has gotten into her? Scanning the crowd at first glance, everything seemed fine. Head banging, playing with balloons and flow toys. Pretty normal stuff. But at a closer look, it was macabre. The balloons they were playing with had a belly button and a skin tone. What fucking hell did we walk into? Among the dancers was one playing with a slimy, gross long object. It was intestines she was pulling from her body and using as a space whip. No one cried in pain. It was like business as usual. To the left of the woman was a man participating in poi. The balls were not lead light-up balls, but dripping, beating hearts. I resisted the urge to scream and cry. Instead, I felt my friend's familiar tug at my arm. It was time to go. On the walls I realized were human skeletons. I saw them on the way in, but I had thought they were just really realistic. More partygoers entered in red paint that stunk of iron. We got through the chaotic line finally outside and found ourselves somehow back in line. Confused and scared, no one would let us leave the line. They physically blocked our way. That's when the bounce spoke in the most ominous and chilling tone I have ever heard. "It's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. You bought the ticket. Enjoy the ride." Laughing Jack Lagoon. It was the summer of 1985. 3 siblings, Billy, Gabriella, and Benjamin, were out playing by the water. The family had moved into a house by the lake a few weeks ago, and their mom had made it very clear to them not to go down to the water by themselves. But being little kids, they didn't listen. One particular day, the kids walked along the lake and found a rope swing hanging from the limb of an old oak that stretched over the lake. They played there on the swing until just before dark, when their mom came down from the house and found them. She was seething. She ordered them inside, smacked them with the wooden spoon, and sent them to bed with no dinner. As they went, crying, to their room, the oldest son, Billy, turned to see his mother crying at the kitchen table. That night, as Gabriella and Benjamin lay sleeping, Billy woke up to a strange sound, like someone laughing. He sat up and listened closely. Nothing. Then his stomach rumbled, and he figured that must have been what woke him up. He decided to go to the kitchen for a snack. As he tiptoed down the hallway, he passed his parents' room. They weren't there. Strange, he thought, and continued to the kitchen. The clock in the room read midnight. It ticked away as he made some toast. Tick-tock, tick-tock. As he settled down at the table, he saw that the back door was open, the fly screen swaying slightly in the breeze. And then he heard it again, and this time it was unmistakable. Someone, a man, was laughing. It sounded like it was coming up from the lake. Where are Mom and Dad? He sat for a minute in silence. The clock was still ticking, but the hands hadn't left the 12 o'clock position. Finally, he grabbed a torch and made his way outside, heading towards the lake. "I'm gonna find you, Mom." When he reached the water, he heard it again. A man laughing, hysterically. It was coming from the left, from the old oak tree where the kids had been playing on the rope swing earlier. As he got closer to the old oak tree, he turned off the torch and started crawling through the grass. The laughter wasn't stopping now. His hand brushed against something in the grass, a kitchen knife slick with blood. Horrified, Billy bolted upright, and then he saw. A man in his 40s, covered in blood, was sitting in the old oak tree, laughing and tying some sort of knot. He laughed as tied it. He laughed as he double-checked it. He laughed as he put his head through it. And as he jumped from the tree, he continued to laugh all the way down. When the rope jerked him to a stop at the bottom, the laughter stopped. But as he hung there, he looked right at Billy and smiled. Billy ran screaming back to the house. When he got to the kitchen, the clock wasn't ticking anymore. The hands were stuck on midnight, and a woman lay on the floor in a pool of blood. She was bleeding from where the knife had pierced her chest. He ran to his room and started screaming and crying. His parent ran into the room, concerned. "Billy, what happened?" "There's a woman in the kitchen. She's dead." The mom and dad looked at each other. "I knew something like this would happen," she said. The dad went into the kitchen and came back a minute later. He said, "Son, there's no one there." And then he smiled. I heard only the sounds of Will banging around in the far bedroom and the winds howling outside. But it's as if someone was screaming at me, telling me to stay away from it. I paused, staring at it. After a minute or so in thought, I decided I would leave it. I continued into the living room area where the piano sat. The second or third time we came here, I convinced Will to clean up the mess he had made the first time we were here. He was defensive and adamant, but finally I convinced him that hanging out in a place that smelled like shit wasn't exactly a good time. I walked by, wanting to run my fingers across the keys, but I stopped myself. Everything here looks as it had the previous time we were here. I open a side table next to the piano, hoping to find something new. It's all the same. Mostly music charts of basic songs. A letter opener as well, and a small candle. I close the drawer and turn to the doorway to the next room. I begin to walk to the doorway when a loud crash startles me. I quickly turn toward the kitchen, where the sound seemed to have originated from. I hear the sounds of Will in the other room, still doing what he does. It seems he hasn't heard the noise, or probably assumed it was me who created it. I slowly make my way back to the kitchen, my steps quiet and cautious. As I round the corner and look toward the sink, I see that several of the canned foods in the cabinet had fallen onto the floor. I continue my steps toward them, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I approach, I see that the cans had fallen in a nearly perfect circle around that knife. The urge to pick it up is so much stronger at this point. It's almost as if I can't resist. I can try, but it will be pointless. I slowly bend down, my arm extended, hand open. I finally grasp it in my hand, and as soon as I do, a shock flows through my body. I'm pushed to the floor, head smashing against the tile. I awaken to blurred vision. I bring myself to a sitting position, trying to process what had happened. But before I can get even a thought, I notice that I'm no longer in the place I was, or the time. It's the same house, clearly, but it's different. It's clean. I smell what I assume is a roast beef cooking in the oven. I hear notes dancing from a record player. I don't know the song, but I can tell that it's old, the innocent sounds of a child's laughter in a distant room. It seems like such a happy place, yet there's an overwhelming feeling of eeriness. I reach for the table above me, to use as leverage to help pull myself up. My knees feel weak, my legs like jello, but I'm able to bring myself to my feet. I have to figure out what's going on. I begin to walk through the kitchen, toward the small hallway that leads to the back of the house, toward the room where, 5 minutes ago, Will was raging about. It should take 4 or 5 steps to get to the room, but as I walk, it feels as though I'm walking down a long stretch of a lonely desert road. I feel depressed, defeated. The overwhelming feeling this house is now giving off is nearly unbearable. But I have to fight through it. There has to be a reason why I'm here, why I'm experiencing what I am. I finally reach the room. I can't explain it, but from the moment I stood up in this kitchen, it's as though I was drawn to it. I look into the room, studying everything. There's a small wooden desk against the wall, facing the window. On it sits a textured globe. An etch a sketch toy lays on the Barbie-themed bed. An easy bake oven near the door. Dollhouse against the far wall. And in the center of the room, a little girl sits, playing with a porcelain doll. She can't be any older than 8. I smile at the sight. She seems so happy. Like she doesn't have a care in the world. Life is free of care. It's perfect. For a moment, it brings a deep sense of joy to my heart, cutting through the ominous feel of this house. But more quickly than the thought dances into my mind, it's torn away. A deep voice yells out from behind me. It's telling the girl to come to the kitchen, and to do it now. This voice, who I can only assume is her father, sounds furious. The girl quickly stands up and starts out of the room. She can't see me. It's like I'm not here, but I am. It's like a dream, only different. I don't quite know how to explain it, but it's a dream that's even more vivid than walking through life in reality. Everything is enhanced. As she approaches me, I can only notice a dramatic change in her. All of the joy, the happiness, it's gone, ripped away and replaced by fear. She passes through me as if I were a ghost. I turn to see her walking down the hall, her eyes glued to the ground, never looking up. I turn back to the room, staring at the spot where only moments ago she sat, playing with her doll, enjoying every second of it. It's sort of scary how quickly things can change.